July 8th, 2024, and Wizards of the Coast just dropped a post on D&D Beyond called the 2024 Monk versus the 2014 Monk, What's New? It came with a 40-minute video with Jeremy Crawford talking about the changes that they've made to the monk since the Unearthed Arcana number 8 dropped last year. And they've gone and done this big breakdown of all the changes that they're bringing to the monk with the 2024 Player's Handbook. And so Jackie and I thought that we would kind of go over some things that stood out. And before we do that, we did want to express how vindicated we feel, because just over a year ago, when they released the Unearthed Arcana number 8, when they called the key points discipline, we said, you know what would be better? Focus. And look what they did. It's now focus.
It's like they listened.
It's like they listened. It's like they listened. Will we get credit? Who knows?
Who knows?
But yeah, we figured we set aside a little bit of time to just go over some of the changes that they made, and some of the stuff that they're choosing to highlight, because the content of the video, when combined with all of these new updates to the monk, actually makes for a rather exciting change to this class.
Yeah.
In many ways, I think the monk is going to be even more busted in the new version of D&D. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Before we dive into like the monk thing, I think one thing that we really need to talk about is the update that they've made to Unarmed Strike.
Mm-hmm.
Because you messaged me, Jackie, and
Yeah.
you were like, I just watched the video, and the Unarmed Strike change that Jeremy Crawford talks about makes the monk really, really interesting. It actually makes all classes interesting, but particularly the monk.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that so the change that they made basically was that in the rules glossary, an unarmed strike has been completely changed so that all characters can basically have 3 options. So if you declare an unarmed strike, you could do one of 3 things. You could naturally use the unarmed strike to deal damage. You could also, though, instead use it to either initiate a grapple or even try to push, like to shove somebody. And all 3 different actions are now combined into a single action. And if you're a monk and you can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action, this makes gameplay really interesting.
The big one was like, we've had a lot of friends and ourselves too, where we always thought about like, grappling and doing like a lot of grapple logs, especially in like martial arts movies or shows. It's like there's an intricate form for that, and it always felt like there was an opportunity for something like that, but the way the rules had them at the time for grappling, it just felt so conflated and very janky in that regard. Like there was a lot of mechanics you had to fiddle with and a lot of dice rolling, and now it's like in a nice little bubble, a little umbrella, if you will. And I appreciate that a lot. I think that's like the best change that I've seen for unarmed strike, because it, like, in the video Jeremy talks about like, if the monk is supposed to be like this dedicated like user of unarmed strikes, like they're then and it makes more sense that they have a better suite for that. And it really this change gives first of all, the change is all classes now can get to do this, and it makes it better. But more importantly, like the monk who is supposed to be like their identity is like the unarmed strike specialist. It's like they now can get all of those things and more, and it's just I think it's a really great change.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about it is that Jeremy really stressed how they want combat to feel like cinematic and dynamic, and he really stressed that like, as a monk with the current rule set, you spend a lot of time trying to set up for like a particular thing, and
Yeah.
it kind of narrows down the decision making that you can make as a monk player. But
Mm-hmm.
now, when you can just make an unarmed strike as a bonus action without any of this other setup,
Yeah.
it actually makes gameplay a little bit more interesting for the
Mm-hmm.
monk, because you have a lot more opportunity to do different things now.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the way like somebody would just homebrew,
Yeah.
an alternative rule to be like, yeah, of course you could do that. They've actually now coded this into the rule set.
Mm-hmm.
I think also the unarmed strike changes really help balance out these new additions to the rules that they've made in the form of weapon mastery. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're dealing with weapon mastery, which is basically a new sort of like special feature unlocked on weapons,
Mm-hmm.
weapon users become a lot more powerful if they invest in using a particular kind of weapon.
Yeah.
But the monk didn't really have that, and their whole shtick is that they've invested in themselves as a weapon, but
Right.
they don't benefit from that. So I think unarmed strike is really, really awesome with this new redefined action that all
Yeah.
characters can take because it helps for the monk and it helps other players too if they want to try doing it. And I think it narrows down the rules. Plus, with Unearthed Arcana and these new rules on how you can use dexterity instead of strength, it
Mm-hmm.
really leads into like the different martial arts styles, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Like, oh, if I want to shove or grapple, I want to think about, oh, well, maybe my character isn't like a brawny character and I'm more dexterous. I think of like, oh, I'm like Ip Man, or if I want to use like other martial arts like Aikido or
Or
something.
you see like that very classic movie trope of somebody literally like doing the neck like using wrapping their legs around someone's neck and face and just twirling them
Oh,
around.
yeah, or like somebody comes at you and then you like flip them over or
Yeah,
something. Like you
yeah,
could do that now.
yeah.
Um,
It mechanically and flavorfully fits now.
totally. And so, they've kind of codified these changes. They've kept the change in the martial arts die, so the unarmed strike damage, which I
Hmm.
think is a welcome change because
Yeah,
going from what was originally a D4 to now a D6
yeah.
actually makes the monk feel
I,
deadly.
I mean, it's the same with like hit dice, right? When we finally moved like like when we moved like a lot of the casters from a D4
Oh,
hit dice.
from a D4, the true glass
God,
cannon.
God, that was such a blessing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's some like really neat stuff here. So like why don't we like go through some of the changes that they've
Mhm.
specifically highlighted in the D&D Beyond blog? Because if you
Yeah.
go back to the Unearthed Arcana playtest 8 material, you'll see a lot of this stuff. So the stuff that they've put in the D&D Beyond blog post, not all of it is transferred over from the Unearthed Arcana. But I believe even though they didn't include like the unarmored defense, that is going to be in the new player's handbook. They just chose not to highlight it here. So we're here to kind of talk about what they've highlighted on this blog post. So we've talked about martial arts at level 1. At level 2 is probably one of the more significant changes with regards to like Asians represent.
Yeah.
Um, and like for us personally, it's like monks focus. So on the document, they said that Monk's Focus is a new name for a familiar level 2 feature where you'll find Flurry of Blows, Patient Defense, and Step of the Wind. The last two having seen some fun improvements. So, obviously, in the previous edition of D&D, it was just called Key. So, you get Key, and then you can do all of this stuff. Um, and so, at level 2, you're now getting a whole bunch of different stuff. Compared to the 2014 version. You're getting your discipline is what they're calling it, but previously it's now focus. You're getting your unarmored movement, and then you're getting this uncanny metabolism. So focus is obviously replacing key.
Hmm.
Um, I like how patient defense got a little bit of an upgrade in that you
Hmm.
could disengage as a bonus action without actually spending focus, which I think is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
But you could
Step of the
level
Wind
it up
too.
essentially.
Yeah, and Step of the Wind you can dash for as a bonus action for free as well. It's definitely the rogues cunning action suite that is. But I love Jeremy Crawford's thought process of just of explaining that the focus points are there to give you an extra bonus.
Hmm.
So it's not like how it was initially started out, where that you had to pay to activate, which we talked about, which we previously started with, was that you had to do a lot of setup with the monk, and that involved like thinking about your points and everything, and sometimes people just get really overwhelmed by that. Versus now, it's like, no, this you get this by automatic, but if you want more things, you can pay for it.
Yeah, I like how you aren't locked out of a class feature when you're out of focus.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really funny. A friend of mine messaged me about these changes,
Hmm.
and he said, I love the excellent ADD representation because I feel like a level 2 monk can only focus on 2 things per day, and then I'm
Yeah,
spent.
yeah,
Which I was like, "Oh, that's relatable. That's
it
super
is.
relatable."
It's very relatable. Yeah.
But yeah, I like how you still have access to the benefits of this class feature, even if you are locked out of focus, like you don't have any
Mhm.
more focus.
Yeah.
But then they've also given you, well, or they've carried it over from the Unearthed Arcana playtest, this
Mhm.
uncanny metabolism, which lets you regain focus
Yep.
once you roll initiative once per long rest. And
Yep.
then you also heal,
Yeah. Which is
which
really
is
good.
super super good because it's not like you have to use you gain. So the text for this one, Uncanny Metabolism, says they wrote this new level 2 feature allows a monk character to regain all expended focus points when they roll initiative once per long rest. Additionally, when you use this feature, you also regain hit points equal to your monk level plus a roll of your martial arts die.
Mhm.
So you're level 2, so you're getting 2 plus 1d6, which is your martial arts die at that point.
Yep.
Um, and that's pretty bonkers.
That's pretty good.
Pretty good for level 2 character once per long rest because it's almost like you're getting the second wind ability that the fighter has.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this is especially those early levels, like it gives you enough staying power for doing multiple encounters
Hmm.
in a session or in an adventuring day, air quotes. Like, and in later kind of higher tier, it can make all the difference for multiple engagements because because by that point, like let's say you're at like what 17th 16th level, right? You're going to get the d12 maximum, so you're getting d12 plus your monk
Plus
level.
your level.
That's a
Yeah,
lot. Like that's especially when we talk about the other features, it's like that's pretty good. Just
100%.
getting a free potions worth of like healing for free.
At the start of a fight.
Yeah, at the
At the
start of a
start of a
fight.
fight. It's not even like you have to use an action. It's like, oh, we roll initiative, like in a JRPG. Like
Yeah.
if you have some sort of item, it's just like boom,
Yep.
you basically heal. I had a question for you. So
Hmm.
I've been thinking about this.
Yeah.
I think we both agree that the change to focus is like very welcome.
Hmm.
How do you feel about the sort of implications, or how do you think that they're going to actually present this to the reader within the like the general lore of the world? Because it's like
Right.
any character can focus, and they've gone
Mhm.
with a very culturally agnostic term here.
Yeah.
Like discipline very much still felt like an Asian martial art thing, but
Yeah.
focus is like pretty culturally agnostic. But in the world of D&D, because they said this is backwards compatible and they have this greater
Hmm.
world of D&D, I've been thinking about this as somebody who expanded on the lore of the
Hmm.
monk with Candlekeep.
Hmm.
And I'm curious as to how they're going to frame this in the player's handbook as to why the monk has this focus. Is it still an energy? Is it still some sort of special thing that only a monk knows how to cultivate?
Right.
Well, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I Yeah, I thought about that too at some point because I wondered, like, well, especially since thinking back to like older iterations of D&D and the settings that they've come
Hmm.
through, it was like, okay, how does this all still jive with each other? Because, like you said, focus is more culturally agnostic, but what does focus really mean, right? In the case
Exactly.
of the monk, and I guess for the monk, it could be. I guess it's kind of left to like your interpretation of like a spiritual focus or a inner focus to yourself, or it could be something like a form of dedication or a sense of martial discipline that is honed much more differently than a fighter would, right?
Yeah.
I think they're trying to give the identity of the fighter as more of like a tool, like they have a toolbox
Yeah. They're a weapon user.
yeah, they're like they have a toolbox of answers, but a monk is like I am the answer.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. I think also with the fighter, with the way they're doing weapon masteries and
Mhm.
how at the D&D summit they talked about being able to move things around. I
Yeah,
think they're very much letting you build the true fighter that you wanted to be when
right.
you first started playing D&D, with the way you use your weapons and how it impacts your style and all that.
Hmm.
But yeah, the monk feels different now. I think this is a welcome change, and I'm not saying that I think that oh, the lore says this because I wrote the lore, literally.
Yeah.
I think that this is great, and I'm just
Mhm.
really, really curious in a positive way as to how they're going to frame this in the player's
Mhm.
handbook.
Same. I'll be
Um,
very interested to see when it comes out.
the one thing that I really, really like, the thing that really stood out to me was this deflect attacks. Now, this was in the playtest, but I'm glad it made it here
Mhm.
because you could block. You could block.
Anything.
You could block anything. Um, So instead of deflecting missiles, you can deflect attacks, any attacks that and that. So they wrote deflect attacks allows you to reduce the damage of any attack that includes bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage.
Mhm.
And I don't know if there are going to be any. I know there's. I think later on they have like deflect
Energy.
energy.
Yeah.
Um,
At the 13th
but
level.
which is like super cool. But the fact that you can not only deflect an attack and similar to deflect missiles, roll a d10, add your dex modifier and monk level, and then reduce it. If you reduce it, you could then use a focus point to redirect the attack.
Mhm.
So imagine if you're a monk and you wade into like a fight and like several enemies attack you and you just roll really high and you just fucking deflect the attacks into every other enemy.
Yeah.
Incredibly cool.
It's the iconic martial arts fantasy trope right there.
You get
Just
everybody. You don't even throw a punch. You could literally now with the rule set, you can end a fight without throwing up a single blow as a monk
yeah,
now, if you're
yeah,
lucky and you use deflect attacks.
yeah. The best part I realized this before we got on our call was I realized that technically mundane traps would all count for this,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
because
just
they all have different
funny.
types of damage.
Yeah, but
Could
it
you?
fits.
Oh, can you imagine though if you're walking up to like a door in a dungeon
Mhm.
and like some sort of trap swings out to attack you,
Yeah,
you deflect the attack into a locked door,
yeah,
and then you
yeah,
just open up the door with that damage? That's
yeah.
actually really cool.
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't
what I
think
was
about that.
thinking about. I was like, dude, that actually makes this way more utilitarian than before.
That's
I love
actually a
it.
cool that's a cool thought.
Yeah.
They did put, like, a limitation on it, obviously. So, for, like, a melee or range attack, the target has to be within 5 feet for a melee attack and
Mhm.
60 feet for a range attack,
Which is still a lot of
which
distance.
is a lot, which is a lot. Given the scale of an encounter, this is bonkers. Um, I'm really happy with, like, just looking at the first 3 levels of the monk, I'm really happy, and I know you
Mhm.
really liked what the subclasses at level 3.
Yeah, in the video, in the video, like Jeremy Crawford goes over some of the subclasses and starts breaking them down. Um, and for here, it's like, well, the four that are being included are like warrior. So the big one is there's a name change. It's no longer
Yes.
the way of something; it is a warrior of something. I think you and I already privately talked about, like probably the best like agnostic change.
Yeah, and that
Second
was in the
only to the focus.
playtest. That was in the
Second only
playtest,
to focus.
but it's good to see it again because, like, you take the playtest material with, like, a grain of salt, and the
Mhm.
fact that we see this here, me and with, the new player's handbook coming out in, like, less than 2 months,
Yeah.
this is pretty much what it's gonna be, or it is what it's gonna be. So I
Right.
like that. I like warrior instead of way of.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's a cool finalized change.
Mhm.
You were talking about one. I mean, we talked about how the warrior of the elements is basically Avatar.
Yeah. So if anyone, so Jeremy talks about the fact that the original way of the four elements was like the most underplayed subclass in the entirety of D&D. Besides the fact that the monk itself was also very underplayed, but the four elements version is like probably it's just difficult to manage. Let's just leave it that. I'll
I
be nice
just
about it. It's very difficult to manage.
I just found a really really busted combo. I just thought about it.
Yeah.
So before we dive into this, so we talked about how they've brought over 4 things. They've got Warrior of Mercy, which is from
Hmm.
Tasha's, Warrior of Shadow, which I know you said you really liked.
Yeah.
There's Warrior of Elements, which is like the Avatar one. You basically get to do AoE elemental attacks. And then Warrior of the Open Hand. So I just thought about this.
Hmm.
So open hand technique remains largely untamed. Open hand technique remains largely unchanged, with the exception of one of its options only blocking opportunity attacks rather than all reactions. Wholeness of Body has been moved to a bonus action and now heals a number of hit points equal to a roll of your martial arts die plus your wisdom modifier, rather than 3 times your monk level, which as a bonus action is good. I think
Yeah.
as a bonus action, plus you already get to heal at the start of battle, which is
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yeah.
But you can now use it a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier per long rest rather than just once.
Yeah.
So you heal and regain your
Mm-hmm.
focus at the start of a fight once per long rest. And if you have high enough wisdom, you could heal multiple times as a bonus action
Yeah.
during a fight, which is insane. And
Yeah.
then you get this fleet step feature that allows you to use Step of the Wind as a bonus action that wasn't already used to perform Step of the Wind,
Mm-hmm.
which is nuts. And then they rebalance Quivering Palm. But now here's the one thing that I thought about. I never thought about this before, but it cost 4 focus points. So what was it before? Warrior of the Open Hand um, had an ability for so Quivering Palm
So Quivering
was
Palm was
4
original
discipline
4.
points, and it's 10d12 force.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the same. I don't know why they said it now costs 4 because that's what it was before. But
I think they're referring to the fact that
or if they're talking about the they're talking about the 2014 one because Quivering Palm was 3 before
yeah, it was 3.
and it was 10d10 damage. But here's the thing. It was 10d10 necrotic.
Yep. It was
Now it's 10d12 force damage on a failed save, or
mm-hmm.
half as much on a successful save. You know what, though? If you use the Gloves of Soul Catching,
So the force damage.
because of the force damage. So, Gloves of Soul Catching from Book of Inner Alchemy, if you make an unarmed strike using the gloves, they deal an extra 2d10 force damage to the target, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you use Quivering Palm and you're wearing the Gloves of Soul Catching. You're instead of doing 10d12 force damage, you're doing 10d12 plus 2d10 force damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful save. But here's the thing, with the Gloves of Soul Catching, you gain hit points equal to the force damage. So
Yep.
if you have the Gloves of Soul Catching and you use Quivering Palm with, Warrior of the Open Hand, you heal on a successful attack.
So
That's
so
constant.
my when
That's crazy.
well, I was thinking about that too because when I remember I was looking it up when we were talking beforehand, and I thought about, wait, is that a combo? And then but then the other thing that was in my head was this fantasy idea of like, if anyone's ever seen like martial arts, any kind of wuxia kind of fight scene where some warriors will be able to like steal or leech
Mhm.
life energy as they attack you. It's
That's
kind
this.
of that same mentality, and it's just I think that just fits so much better. And I also believe that changing it to force was a flavor win overall as a whole.
Yep.
Because I think they're also trying to do away from that original concept of like the 5 points of death kind of technique.
And look, here's the thing. At level 20, if the numbers for focus points carry over from the playtest, you have 20 focus
It's a
points.
lot.
That's 5.
It's a
5
lot.
times you could do this. And
Yeah.
that is an immense amount of healing. So that's you have the Gloves of Soul Catching, you use Quivering Palm, and you basically heal 10d12 plus 2d10
Mm-hmm.
HP. And you could do that 5 times if you use no other focus abilities. That's absolutely bonkers. That is so much healing.
Yeah.
And so like making that force damage rather than necrotic makes the Gloves of Soul Catching even more busted than they
Yeah.
were before.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have to kill like 3 people to make the gloves and you have to do all this stuff.
True, but yeah, I'll just say this for anybody who hasn't looked at Candlekeep Mysteries, you should.
You should. It's so good.
It's so good.
But yeah, but I know you like the Warrior of Shadow. What was it that you liked about the Warrior of
So
Shadow?
Jeremy talked about a lot of so the initial changes they made were the fact that you can cast darkness and minor illusion now, but not only that, you can actually see through your own darkness now.
Which is
Uh,
crazy.
Great, because that means that all your attacks are now have are advantage now, which is great. And then the other thing is it works into the improved shadow step, so you can now use your own darkness and shadows to teleport around, but you get a free unarmed strike as well after you teleport. So because it's all part of a bonus action to do the shadow step. So you get a free unarmed strike on top of it whenever you land and do that.
That's so
And then
good.
the Cloak of Shadows got reworked. It lasts for a minute or until you're incapacitated, or you end your turn on bright light. But basically, you
And you
have
have it, but it persists even if you attack, which is
yeah.
really, really good because
So even if you attack or cast a spell, it's ridiculous. It's
you're
basically
always invisible for
it's greater
10
invisibility.
turns, like 10 rounds. You are
It's
invisible.
greater invisibility for that, and you do have to pay obviously the focus cost for it. But I don't think that's a big enough deal for the fact that you get basically greater invisibility, and then on top of that,
Yeah.
difficult terrain doesn't exist for you, and you don't have to spend. This is the big one. You don't spend focus points to use Flurry of Blows.
It's so good.
By the time you're 17th level, you are dealing 3 Flurry of Blows per use, anyways. That's like 5 attacks for every action and bonus action combined.
Can you imagine Shadow Cloak, Gloves of Soul Catching, Flurry of Blows? You're basically a Naruto character. It's so good.
Yeah. It is terrifying. The moment Jeremy Crawford said, "Yeah, you get the Flurry Blows for free. While your Cloak of Shadow exists," and I'm just like, "Excuse you?"
Yeah, you could solo like entire encounters now.
Yeah. They I think the big thing I've noticed about the monk that Jeremy has mentioned, especially across the subclasses, is that almost all the subclasses have some improvement to their movement for the monk. So the monk is not only supposed to be an unarmed specialist, but also is capable of literally dominating a battlefield by being everywhere if possible. So it really fulfills that kind of fantasy trope of also like they're everywhere at once, and so it kind of fits. The big one for the Warrior of Elements was that you can eventually get a fly speed and a swim speed, which is really nice and really big. And then, of course, the big other thing too is that I think Jeremy said that at the higher levels you basically become a walking elemental chaos effect essentially, and you can just
It's Dragon Ball.
It's Dragon Ball.
It's Dragon Ball.
I had a child, and this is what we got, and I'm not upset about it.
No, it's so good. It's really on theme, and it's like I've been like thinking about this all afternoon, and it was like, do we still feel like the monk is Asian coded? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But do we think that it's done so in a way that's problematic or tropey? And I don't think it's problematic.
No.
But I think it's incredibly tropey, but in a good way.
Yeah. It leans in on the camp in a good way, and in terms of like fulfilling all the ideas you would typically want from a wuxia fantasy in some capacity, right?
And the art.
Arts fantasy.
And the art.
Art is amazing.
The art is incredible. Like this Dragonborn monk.
The Dragonborn monk.
Super Asian.
Yeah.
But I love it. And this like, is this a half orc? I think it's a half orc.
Yeah, the half orc monk.
So good. And that's the elemental.
Yeah.
That's the elemental one.
It's sick.
It's so good. I'm really into it so far. And that's just level 3 when you pick your subclass. Because at level 5, you get Stunning Strike, which I believe that they also rebalanced. So it and you could use a monk weapon or unarmed strike. First of all, monk weapons were expanded.
Yep.
So it's like
any simple weapon,
but also any martial weapon with the light property on it.
But the big one was the all simple weapons.
Yes,
it was originally just martial simple weapons, which
bows
or melee simple weapons, and so like the fact that now it's all makes a big deal because some people don't realize a short bow is a simple weapon. A short bow is a simple weapon.
You could be a ranged monk.
Yeah. You could be a ranged monk. And by the way, like historically speaking, several martial arts does incorporate the bow and arrow as a weapon of skills. It's like it's not unfathomable. And it makes sense.
There is a really cool Chinese animated series called Fog Hill of 5 Elements.
Oh yeah.
And in it, I'm pretty sure I've said this to you, but in it, this guy takes an abacus and turns it into a bow, and he starts shooting these like force beads. And I'm like, that's what you could do with Stunning Strike.
Yeah.
I think it's very cool.
But it also kind of fits that niche of like the combat archer. I know the ranger is still technically the combat archer, but like imagine if you were a monk instead with the combat with the flair of like a combat archer, right? Just being able to spin around, shoot your short bow, and then land a kick at the same time. It's like it fits it all together very nicely.
It's very awesome. And then you also get Empowered Strike at level 5.
Mhm.
So it's the new version of Key Empowered Strike. So you change the damage of your unarmed strike to force damage.
Which is probably the best feature at 5th level.
So
like
good.
it's amazing how like I know the elements are like you can make your unarmed strikes like all these other elements, which is cool and great and all, but very little can resist or be immune to force damage.
Yeah.
Very few things.
I guarantee you that when they were coming up with this, they wanted that trope of like, when like the anime, when like somebody gets hit and then there's this like blast that goes out behind them.
Exactly.
That's 100% what this is.
Oh yeah, it's 100% that. I have no issue with that.
No, I love it. I think it's excellent.
Plus, it gives the monks some more staying power in terms of like combat wise, because like casters already can solve any problem they want, and the other martial characters have other utility kits to help them get around that problem. But the monk is like, I only have myself, and I gotta make it work.
Yeah, and I think the language here is very purposeful too, because they said that your unarmed strikes now can deal force damage, whereas in the 2014 rule set, it says that your unarmed strikes count as magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage. So they're being a lot more specific with it, which I like. You get this heightened focus at level 10. So there are a whole bunch of other things that you're going to get in between, but we're, again, just talking about this. Heightened focus, another like super cool thing. Flurry of Blows gets an additional attack.
Yeah, for those bonus actions. It's ridiculous.
So it's a 3 per bonus action at level 10. Patient Defense, you get temporary HP. And so at level 10, your martial arts die are D8. So you get 2d8 HP when you use Patient Defense. And then Step of the Wind, you can move another creature.
Yeah, the best part is if you are here's the thing, you can also grapple something and take it with you.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Now they don't provoke opportunity attacks when you do that. However, nothing ever said about throwing them over a ledge.
And you get slow fall at level 4. So you could throw yourself over the ledge, let go of them, and then just drift down and watch them die.
Yep. It's great.
That's so good. And then you also get self-restoration. So you get to avoid exhaustion, which I think is really good here, because I hope they talk more about like exploration and stuff like that. Because I think exhaustion is like deadly. Actually, it's scary in 5e. But they don't touch on it. I don't think a lot of people use it.
I definitely use it, but as a GM, but I can say as a rules set, they don't touch it as much as they should.
And then at level 13, you get direct energy. So in addition to deflect attacks, you can fucking deflect damage of any damage type, which is crazy. So, let's just say, and I mean, you're not going to be able to reduce it by that much, but the visual of like, a dragon breathes fire on you.
The big one, you can deflect disintegrate.
Yeah.
You can deflect disintegrate. You may not deflect the whole thing, but it may be enough to prevent you from literally dying.
Super cool.
Yeah, it's huge.
It effectively makes you immune to magic missile.
Yes, actually.
Because you're rolling so much more than the damage that an individual magic missile will deal.
The funniest is you could almost also if they're throwing enough magic,
you could deflect them back.
Yeah,
that's so good. And then perfect focus. So that one is awesome because it says, so this is another level 13 thing. When you roll initiative, so we've already talked about how uncanny metabolism is really good.
Yeah.
But if you're below 4 focus points and you don't use uncanny metabolism, tops you up to 4.
You just get 4 anyways.
So the thing is, it tops you up to 4, and this is super good later because it tops you up to exactly 1 quivering palm.
Yep, 1 quivering palm.
For instance, for example.
Yeah, like 1 quivering palm. Even I'm going to assume that most of the other features are going to cost roughly the same amount as well. So like that gives you back your capstone ability again to use at the very least for most of them.
which is
Um,
again making sure that people have the ability to actually play out their character. And I think with the way the monk used to be, it was very much like, oh, I should probably save my key so that I could use it in the next fight. Now it's just
yeah,
like, I'm gonna like go for broke. Yeah, you know what? I might not have it all back, but I know I'm gonna get some
yeah,
back and I'm
yeah.
gonna heal.
Yeah, you basically treated the monk as like a tactical missile. You wanted to wait until you had the opportune time to just unload everything.
But now the monk is just like good in every fight.
Yeah.
And so that's perfect focus. Then at level 18, they talked about superior defense. So at the start of a turn, you can expend 3 focus points to gain resistance to all damage types except force for 1
Mhm.
minute or until you're incapacitated.
Yep.
That is really cool.
It's great. It kind of narratively fits in the sense that like you're using your focus to just block all that damage, right? It's just like that.
Yep.
It's that very anime trope of like standing in front of a big beam of
Yeah, you
energy.
take a defensive stance.
Yeah, yeah.
I love it. And then they also, what I really liked about the writing here is that they also used 2 examples. They're like, yeah, like an ancient white dragon's cold breath or a fire giant dreadnought's shield charge.
Will make
I
a lot
like
of
that.
difference. Will make a
It's
big
kind
difference.
it's kind of like how I was playing Elden Ring with shields. Like
Yeah,
how a
yeah,
lot of people are actually playing the Elden Ring DLC with shields.
yeah.
Then at level 19, so they talked about epic boons. So they wrote that in the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, epic boons were a special reward handed out at the DM discretion. Now they've made their way over to the 2024 Player's Handbook as a new type of feat with the prerequisite of being level 19. And I know you and I talked about how we loved prerequisites on feats because we love 3rd and 3.5 edition.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
Now, they wrote here that while monks can take any epic boon, they recommended the boon of irresistible offense. And this is so good.
It is. It is. Oh my
Like
god.
you get to increase your strength or dex by 1 to a max of 30. Then bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage you deal always ignores resistance.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Always.
that. It's like it's like if the if making your attacks into force damage wasn't already kind of silly, just be going. Yeah, I don't even need to do that. I could just not care. I
It's
will hit
like it's like Dune where they're like their blades go through the shields.
every yeah.
But then if you get a crit, if you roll a natural 20, you get to deal bonus damage equal to not your modifier, but your ability
Ability
score.
score. So say
So
you
like,
have
oh, if I have a
30.
30 dex,
Yeah,
I roll a 20, I deal 30 extra damage.
that's pretty good. That's
Pretty
pretty
good.
good.
And then, level 20, body and mind, you get to increase your dex and wisdom, not or, dex and wisdom by 4.
It's a lot.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Um, so good. So if you didn't, I think most people will probably choose wisdom at that point because
Mhm,
the boon of irresistible offense lets you max out your dex to 30. But here, the
mhm.
language they say the max is 25 for body and mind.
Yeah,
And it's one of the few times that you're going to get that bonus to your wisdom.
yeah.
But I want to know because we're running out of time. I wanted to know like overall thoughts on the 2024 monk.
I'm excited. I actually want to play monk.
Me too. I honestly like looking at this. I want to play 5e again.
Yeah,
I don't want to be a GM though. I want to just play. I just
yeah,
want to play a
yeah,
monk. I just want to
yeah.
play a monk.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the monk actually get its strides, get its fun, and see what other things it can do. Because like it definitely has always been the odd child out of a lot of the a lot of the classes in general.
Hmm.
Like those numbers about like Jeremy Crawford's not understating the fact that like it's an underplayed class. It really is an underplayed class. Like you seldomly hear anybody play it, just because there's just a lot of setup. There's a lot of overwhelming thought process that has to come into it that makes people really just second guess themselves playing it. And again, because of the way that the point system worked, it was like you have to like wait until the right moment to unload everything. Otherwise, you never knew when was the good time. Now it's like I don't care if I use up all my points. I'm gonna get something back for it, and that might just be the one thing I need, and that's all. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah, you can
Uh,
really Leroy Jenkins yourself into combat now as a
yeah,
monk.
yeah.
I
It's good. I love it.
the thing that 2024 monk has changed for me is that in the past I've always been like oh, maybe the monk should just be a subclass of the fighter. But
Hmm.
now I think that they've actually done a good job of differentiating the monk and the fighter.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the things that I appreciate most. Obviously, the unarmed, the like deflect attacks is cool, but that was in the previous playtest. The change
Hmm.
to focus is really welcome.
Hmm.
All I want to see is how they do it in the lore. But I'm really happy with this, and it's honestly like the one that class that I am super excited to play. I'm actually really excited to play monks and fighters.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a
Really
while since
excited.
I've wanted to play monks and fighters again. I think since third edition and fourth edition. So like, it's been a while.
And I think there might be some neat things that you could do with multi-classing between monk and fighter too,
Yeah, I
especially
think
with how
so.
weapon like mastery works.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I think once we start seeing the others start getting revealed, because like I know Jeremy also mentioned the briefly in that video, like the Ranger. I'm
I
excited.
know you're hyped about the
I'm
ranger.
hyped about the Ranger because the Ranger needed some love the entirety of fifth edition's tenure, and it's long overdue. And I have written many multiple blog articles to show for it.
Yeah.
So like I'm very excited to see the monk in general get its due. Just because like it actually looks fun. It actually looks like it's more engaging. It's less just thinking about it and just doing, which is kind of if you think about how a lot of martial arts are, it's all about doing, not thinking.
Yeah.
So
No mind. And I think one other thing is that the monk actually now feels like a class that you might be able to play a solo adventure with, which
yeah.
I think is also really, really cool.
Hmm.
Um, but that said, Jackie, thank you for joining me for this reaction to the new 2024 monk class overview blog post on D&D Beyond.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
I think it was important that you and I kind of do a follow-up video to the one we did last year.
I know. I'm glad I
And
could be here for it.
hopefully Wizards acknowledges that we said focus. We said
We
focus
said
over a year ago.
we sure
Um,
did.